family and fellow soldiers. I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. Pawlet, Vermont, September 15th, 2024, 4 o'clock a.m. Brian Crossman Sr. and his wife Erica had a good life, a great one in fact. Brian was something of a big fish in a small pond. You see, Pawlet is one of those really small towns, so you know some twisted stuff is sure to go down there. Now, Brian and Erica had just gotten married in June of this year. They had a mixed family. By that I mean they both each had a child of their own. Erica's child was Colin, and Brian Sr.'s son was Brian Crossman Jr., age 23. Just before 4 o'clock a.m. on September 15th, Brian Crossman Jr. called the police to tell them that he had found his father, stepmother, and stepbrother shot to death inside their home. A state police corporal met the junior Crossman at nearby Wells Village High School, finding him with blood-like stains on his clothes. Crossman Jr. told police that he went for a late-night walk and came back to find his slain family members all dead. He also claimed that his clothes were covered in blood because he'd attempted to drag his father's corpse outside the home and load him into a utility vehicle to take him to his grandmother's house across the road. Now, this village, Pawlet, it's right on the state line with New York, so the Vermont State Police were able to call the Granville, New York Police Department and troopers from the New York State Police. Now, the New York State Police stayed with Crossman Jr. while the Vermont Police went to the Crossman residence to investigate. When they got to the location, it turned out that the home was actually more like a compound, though they called it a farm. The police discovered a dead man at the front door and a semi-automatic pistol on the floor inside the doorway. Crossman Sr.'s body had gunshot wounds to the head and torso. Erica Crossman was found naked inside the home with a gunshot wound to the head, and Taft had died of multiple gunshot wounds. Investigators said that they had found a set of clothes matching Brian Crossman Jr.'s size on the floor of the bedroom where Erica Crossman's body had been discovered. The clothes had stains consistent with blood on it. Crossman Jr.'s explanation for this was that he had changed his clothes before trying to drag his father's body out of the house. By the end of the day, Brian Crossman Jr. had been admitted to a mental health unit at Glen Falls Hospital, which is in New York State. He wasn't arrested until 4 days later, after Vermont State Police obtained an arrest warrant for him. He's since been arraigned and pleaded not guilty. Brian Crossman Jr. didn't live with his father. According to his grandmother, he lives in Granville, New York, and was only staying at the house for the weekend. According to a friend, Erica was scared of Crossman Jr. and didn't want to be alone with him. The friend recommended that Erica lock up any guns that might be around the house. As it turns out, Brian Crossman Sr. was an avid hunter and liked guns and kept them around for a variety of reasons, I suppose. Now, the reason that I chose this story in particular to be the subject of today's crime report is that there's something of a pattern that I noticed. Brian Crossman Sr. was a politician serving a 1-year term as the town of Pawlet's liaison to buildings and development and liaison to the town highway department. There's a mouthful. And he's not even the only small town politician to have been murdered that week. Because only a few days later in Kentucky, you had that sheriff, Sean Mickey Steins, who killed Judge Kevin Mullins in his own chambers. And that incident happened in Lecter County, which has a population of about 20,000 people. And the location of today's crime report took place in Pawlet, Vermont, which has a population of only 1,395 people. So once again, these big crimes happen in these small towns, and of course everyone out there in both these places will be screeching that this kind of thing doesn't happen here, except it always happens there. You take the most privileged people in the society, shield them from all criticism or correction, give them guns, and then people act completely shocked that this keeps happening. And predictably, the white media doesn't even attempt to connect any dots or acknowledge that there's any dots that need to be connected. So this Brian Crossman Jr. character murdered 3 people in a town of about 1,400 folks. 3 people. That's the same number of people who were killed in the entire city of Chicago that same weekend. This is something of an important detail, I think. More people were killed in one day in Pawlet, Vermont, than died in the entire city of Chicago that entire weekend. Now, where's the white media outlets at to tell everyone how Chicago is the deadliest city in America? But when we do an apples-to-apples comparison, we see that per capita, one of the white supremacists' favorite phrases, these small towns are far deadlier than the big cities. Their concern for public safety disappears the instant they don't have black people to point to. That seems to be the problem. They can't get a full head of steam about public safety unless there's a black person who can be made the bad guy of the story. When you put power into the hands of the most privileged and pampered people in the society, that never works out. And by the way, this incident in Pawlet and the one in Lecter County, that sure makes the headlines about Officer Eric Adams of the NYPD seem tame by comparison now, don't it? Of course, you can count the seconds until the white media predictably begins proclaiming that this psycho, Brian Crossman Jr., was the victim here, and on cue, they're already claiming that he has mental illness. That train's never late. They're saying that his grandmother says that Crossman Jr. and his father had a troubled relationship. There's another phrase we can recite in our sleep. Due to Crossman Jr.'s mental health and learning disability. Yeah, all the buzzwords here. Mental illness, mental health, troubled. Vermont police say that Crossman Jr.'s cell phone had searches on it for serial killers, so they're already laying the groundwork to say that this is a totally abnormal situation, never happens here, and they don't know what all happened, but whatever it was, it definitely had to be mental illness because he's not black. Just shameless. Now, in this case, the killer's sister, Rachel, was interviewed by Vermont State Police, and she told them Crossman Jr. has always shown an interest in death, and that he tortured frogs and kittens in the past. I mean, this is what always happens, isn't it? Some satanic abomination or another happens in one of these small towns for the umpteenth time, and everybody pretends as if they're so shocked, oh, that couldn't possibly have happened here, except that it did. And then all we have to do is just ask one or two questions about one or two people who knew these psychos, and that's when they start rattling off that, oh, this guy, he was running around threatening people, he had guns that he was pointing at people, he was torturing frogs, small woodland creatures, children, the whole nine. We find out that the guy had a criminal record long as his arm. Everybody knew it was no surprise at all. All the warning signs were there. The only thing that this guy didn't do was to torture a nun in front of the local police station. But nothing was done about him. I guess under the circumstances, people should be grateful that he didn't shoot up the local high school, but considering the fact that he chose to meet the police at a high school, maybe that was the next spot he was planning to visit. But in both of these cases in Vermont and Kentucky, you had so-called public officials who had been caught up in this stuff. One of them was a public official who committed the kill. It was caught on video, so there's no denying it. And these are the exact same individuals who will be so sanctimonious and self-righteous, getting in front of the camera, wagging their fingers at black people and saying, you people, you need to learn to stop killing each other. Now, if these public officials were more concerned about what's going on literally in their own homes than they are with what's going on the other side of town with black people, these tragedies could be greatly curtailed. But that, of course, is not what's important to them. Control is what's important. And as a result, they got these free-range killers who are on the loose and nothing's being done about them. And the white media is going to make sure that this stuff conveniently falls down the memory hole, and they're certainly not going to draw any connections and ask, hey, how is it that these public officials have this stuff going on, or that they're the ones committing these crimes? No connecting the dots is allowed. And of course, nobody's going to be asking any questions about what's going on in these homes that's producing psychos like this. How is it that you got individuals here who claim that kids who fish and hunt don't steal and deal? Yeah, they instead decide to take the guns that they were hunting with and blow their entire families away. Nobody makes any connections now. So we have an across-the-board conspiracy of silence. From the perpetrators to the so-called white media, nobody says nothing. Yeah, that's the real no-snitching policy in America. And that being the case, these public officials who are being killed either by their friends or in some cases by their own family members, their children no less, well, it looks like they've already accepted that this is going to be an occupational hazard of the job or a rather occasionally abnormal part of their normal lives. It's perversely ironic that America's elected officials have chosen to live or die like this. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Eric Bailey, Norma Anthony, Ronald Waits, Earl Gates, and Dia Williams. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.